Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, here with Prawn News, weekly tech news that I found interesting and hopefully you will too. So I'm going to start off with this one, which is a story about an ice giant all-in-one cooler that doesn't have a pump in it, which I think is pretty interesting. So an all-in-one cooler might not seem that interesting, but you might well be aware of or have thought of the issues with pumps in these systems. Traditionally, there's a little pump in there that pushes the coolant around inside. Well, this ice giant one doesn't use a pump and therefore potentially, apparently, negates the long-term problem that you might have where that pump would wear out and then obviously the coolant doesn't go around inside the cooler and then your CPU just gets too hot and eventually it just degrades. So this thing is actually pretty interesting, although pretty expensive, and basically it uses a copper evaporator and a condenser system inside it. So that's how it works rather than a pump. It's evaporating. It's pretty cool technology. It's a cool cooler, and it works with a variety of sockets as well. So like older LGA 1150 socket, for example, LGA 1200, 1700, 1851, 2011, then AMD's AM4 and AM5 platforms. So it's multi-compatible with loads of things. Now the company says that apparently maintenance is something you don't really need to think about, apart from just cleaning the fans occasionally, giving them a dust. It should last for a long time. I think this is particularly interesting, and if you've been worried about the longevity of the pump in an all-in-one cooler and that's put you off, then this might be a good solution. That sort of pump issue is a problem, obviously, with anything. If you've got a custom loop system, it could be a problem over a long period of time, and it's the same for all-in-one coolers. Eventually, that pump is going to degrade, no matter the mounting position. It's just going to wear out naturally. You might well have upgraded your PC before that happens and hopefully got yourself a new cooler, but it's something pretty cool. I thought it was an interesting story. Another interesting story comes from MSI. So MSI's got the MEG AI1600T PCIe 5 power supply unit. And if you've been worried about your power supply unit making too much noise, which based on the comments that I regularly see on my videos, people are concerned about, then this might well be interesting because it's been rated by Cybenetics as having AA plus noise rating, which basically means apparently that it doesn't get over 9 decibels, 9.37 decibels, which is ridiculously quiet. So very low noise levels. Obviously, it's also PCIe 5.1 compatible and features two 12-volt 2x6 power connectors. Now, if you don't know already, the 12-volt 2x6 power connectors are basically the new iteration of the 12-volt high power connector from before for NVIDIA GPUs. So previously, those connectors were potentially causing issues quite early on in the releases. Some of them were melting. Corsair's got an interesting article that goes into depth on this that I actually linked to in my previous Prawn News video, but I'll do it again anyway. And essentially now, with the newer GPUs, on the GPU and on the power supply end, there's a newer connector which has a slightly different design to the way the pins connect, therefore making it seat better, therefore reducing the chances of a power cable melting and your graphics card getting ruined, which is obviously fantastic. So this one has it all, plus two of those power connectors. So for some reason, if you wanted to power two GPUs in your system, you could. And obviously, with 1600 watts of power is pretty beastly and was going to manage to power your system pretty nicely. So 5090, for example, shouldn't be a problem. But really quiet. So that's the main takeaway. If you've been after something really quiet in your system, you've been worried that your power supply might be a bit too noisy, or maybe you've already got a noisy power supply, then this could be an option to upgrade to. So quite neat. Nintendo has revealed, or at least teased, the Switch 2. Obviously the successor to the Switch, with a trailer, and doesn't give that much away, although it does show a new design, a bigger screen, redesigned controllers. And there's been stories around already where basically there's a thought that the new controllers could be taken off and then used on your desk as a mouse, giving Switch users the ability to skirt it around on their desk and use it in a more accurate way. So there's some interesting highlights there. Apparently more information is going to come soon. So this is just an early tease, but Switch 2's finally here. It's been rumoured for forever. My kids are pretty excited. I personally don't really care because I'm more a Steam Deck user or full-on desktop gamer, but There's some interesting things from the video. I caught sight that the thumbsticks, for example, seem to be redesigned. And obviously those stick drift issues have been plaguing Switch for ages. So maybe that's been worked on for Switch 2? But that's just conjecture. Microsoft has filed a patent for game-altering narratives using generative AI. So more AI news. And part of me is fed up with covering AI news, but also I find it really interesting. I'm conflicted. AI is terrible on one hand, Terminators, and brilliant on the other because it's improving our lives. And obviously there are issues potentially if we use AI more in creating games, then that means game devs are losing out. So that's not great. But if it's done in a good way. So this is obviously early stages because it's just a patent. There's nothing really actually coming from it at the moment, but it basically gives the ability for game devs and also users to create stuff using generative AI. Now, I think this is interesting because obviously Microsoft heavily invested in AI. They've been spending millions and billions with OpenAI. So they've obviously got a good investment going there. They really care about it. They can see the potential of it. So seeing it then being pulled into games is not unexpected. I've talked in the past about how NVIDIA has been pushing this. Obviously, we've got DLSS 4 and other technology which is using AI, but also they've been working on creating it, the ability to have character engagement, to talk to characters in games. And then there was that PUBG story where you've got to have AI-controlled NPC. So AI is going to be a big thing moving forward in games, I think, in a variety of different ways. So for hardware news, there's some interesting things coming from Asus. The company's been working on more BTF solutions. So it has basically connectors for BTF graphics cards. So basically you've got a rear connect motherboard. Now I've actually seen one of these before. So you can have rear connect motherboards where all the cables are at the rear. And then you can also get some compatible graphics cards where the connector for the power cable is on the back of the graphics card and plugs into the motherboard, and then it gets its power through the motherboard, therefore abandoning the power cables on the front of the GPU, making for a really clean build. Now this looks very nice, but it's quite niche because obviously if you buy that graphics card, you need a motherboard which will support it. So you couldn't use that Asus motherboard with a Gigabyte motherboard, for example, because it just wouldn't work. Well, Asus is now apparently working on a solution to that, where it'll have a detachable connector which can provide up to 1,000 watts. So it's called the GCHPWR, which is a new design which will be removable. So you can either have it or not have it. So you could swap to the power cables. So that'll mean that the GPU can be bought universally. So anybody could buy it. If you don't have a rear connect motherboard from Asus specifically, you could still buy that GPU and just not use the connector and choose to use your cables instead, or you can plug it into a BTF motherboard. This is great if you buy a GPU and then you're planning to upgrade in future. Also helps with resale value and other things, because you obviously, if you're trying to sell a GPU which is BTF, it's pretty limited in the number of people that are going to want to buy it. But this is a good thing. I really love the BTF stuff, so seeing more of it is great news, I think. Good potential to just have cleaner builds and a really nice system. And this connector obviously eliminates any worry about power cables not being seated properly or just trying to route them through your system, because it can be a real pain trying to run a power cable from your power supply unit to the GPU in a neat way. In different cases, sometimes it's really tight, it presses against the glass, doesn't stretch properly, it looks messy, and you end up with a headache. If you've got a BTF solution like this, which just plugs into the board, really brilliant. It's brilliant. Talking about brilliant, Intel is apparently once again promising patches for its Core Ultra CPUs to improve performance, up to 25% increase in performance with these changes. This is a briefing that happened recently at CES, and they're saying the fixes involve updating Windows to Windows 11, make sure your build is 26100.2314 or higher, and then also there's BIOS updates and firmware updates from the manufacturers of your motherboard that should help with improvements on this. I think I might do a video on this because it could be interesting. I've got one of the Z890 boards, so I'll try and update it and then do a video on how to do it and see what difference it makes. But the claim is Cyberpunk 2077, for example, saw a 26% increase in performance after doing these updates versus previously. So that's potentially really good. And it's nice to see Intel working on these improvements. Although it would be nice if they'd done this before launch. But it's just not been a great time recently. Finishing off with a little bit of car news. The Hyundai Ioniq 5N has now got a Drift King variant with a huge wing and some other upgrades. It's just been revealed at the Tokyo Auto Show. And so it takes the car, which is already a beast, if you don't know, is already built to do really well, with 641 brake horsepower, basically slaps on some bigger brakes. So it's got 6-piston calipers and precision machined from Duralumin, which I probably pronounced wrong, but apparently it's used for aircraft manufacturing. So it's aircraft grade. And then you've got better brake discs, which are 50% larger than stock ones, more reliable braking. And then it's got lowered springs from H&R and just general improvements. And obviously looks mean too. Apparently it's going to go on sale in Korea and Japan in the first half of 2025. Whether the rest of the world will see it remains to be seen. I really like that Hyundai 5N. It's mean looking, and they've made this boy racer version, which obviously, I mean, I'm not really too sure about rear wings. This one's carbon fiber. Sometimes they look a bit naff. This one looks pretty good. But it takes something that she's... The reason this car is quite nice, and I like one, is because it's pretty understated, but also is insanely powerful and fast, because the 0 to 60 time is like 3 seconds or something, and it's been well reviewed all over the place, and it's got great reviews. But as with all electric vehicles, pretty expensive, and I expect this one will be even more ridiculously expensive. Final bit of news is for UK viewers, or people that love space stuff. Apparently there's been approval for vertical space rocket launch from the UK, so that means we're going to be sending stuff to space more. And as someone that loves space stories, I'm pretty into this one. It's pretty cool. So a German rocket company, Rocket Factory Augsburg, I've butchered a lot of pronunciations of things in this video, I'm very sorry, has been granted permission with a license to do test flights from Scotland later this year. So this is pretty awesome, although hilarious. Apparently there's been stories by tabloid newspapers about allowing Germans to fire rockets from UK shores, and how World War II. Silly stories like that. But I think, for one, it's great, and obviously German engineering going into space, launching from the UK, more space travel stuff. Fantastic. Really good news and exciting, I think, potentially. So that's it for Prawn News. There's not much this week, but there probably will be more in the next couple of weeks because there's some exciting things happening. I've got offered a 5090 potentially to look at, so that's cool. Although I probably won't get it in time for the review embargoes, which are lifting near the end of the month, so watch out for the performance there. There are some interesting stories around fake frames and DLSS 4, and obviously the performance of the GPUs. I'm pretty keen on seeing how it goes. Hope you have a good weekend, and thanks very much for watching.